Welcome to the Upshot, Ultra World Disc Golf's podcast about the latest in the disc golf world. I'm the editor, Charlie Eisenhood. Joining me is Josh Mansfield on this Tuesday, December 17th. Josh, daycare is a scourge. Lewis got norovirus or something over the weekend, and despite all attempts to avoid, no avoiding happening.
Charlie, for Christmas, would you like me to get you one of those big inflatable bubbles? So whenever he comes home, you can put him in quarantine for a couple hours before you let him out.
Dude.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Anyway, I'm alive enough to record this shorter than usual podcast,
but not by much.
No. I'm hanging on. No, I was going to say I'm hanging on like the 49ers season, but the 49ers season is over. So
yeah, Charlie, I'm calling EMS services if you use that analogy, man.
Please dial 911 for me immediately. We got a couple of sort of interesting stories to get to today. One is that the Prodigy has named Will Schusterick, its longtime sales director, the new CEO. And so perhaps a turning of the page for Prodigy. We're going to have Will on the show with us. We recorded this interview with him last week, but decided because the big show is already pretty long that we were going to just move it to here. And so we've got it for you today. And Will has also agreed to join us for a subscriber bonus segment. That'll be live in our Discord at some point this week. Once we confirm schedules with Will. So make sure you get yourself a subscription, get access to all of our bonus segments, our live out the backs. What do we call it now? Inside the circle.
In the bags?
It's what? Well, yes, also our in the bags.
Oh, I'm not sure what you were trying to say there,
Out
Charlie.
the back is the ultimate Frisbee bonus.
Oh,
segment.
Okay.
And that's just one of those days for me. All right. So thank you for your patience. We're also going to be talking about this new GK Pro branding change and the new A-tier tour that they are calling the Go Throw Tour that got dropped earlier this week. And so there's been a lot of buzz about that and the Pro Tour card and a bunch of stuff. So we'll discuss that after we talk to Will Schusterick. Before we talk to Will, I just wanted to get your thoughts, Josh. Do you like the move from Prodigy? Does this feel like the right step? They kind of had a CEO earlier who was somewhat more of an anonymous person, not a big name in the disc golf world. He left, I'm not sure exactly how long ago, a few months ago. And Will has sort of been running the show without officially being called CEO. And so now he is effectively CEO. Do you think this is a good move?
I think it's a good start because there's real power. You have two players over on Prodigy that are a little bit older, out of the scene in terms of the competitive side. Kale Leviska, for example, plays now in the MP40 division, but is somebody else who he's owned the course in Minnesota, run the preserves. He's very closely integrated both with Prodigy as well with the broader disc golf scene. And then Will Schusterick obviously is a player who had just amazing potential and won a handful of majors, but just had a career that was limited by injury. And so there's still a lot of fondness for Will among people that I talk to, whether they're big Prodigy fans or not. And it's always, when you talk about Will, like the man, what could have been. And so I think that Prodigy needs a public face that is somebody that the broader disc golf community can connect to and believe that they feel like have an understanding of the disc golf community. And that I think that's going to serve them well. It almost is like a player sponsorship in a way, right? It's true that Will isn't playing right now, but it still is a very, very high profile player with 3 US championships under his belt, who's going to be leading a company. And there's power and advantage to that. And I think that's a smart move. On the flip side, I think it's going to be really important that Will has been deeply ingrained in Prodigy for as long. I don't know if Will has ever been separate from Prodigy. And if he is, I don't recall it. And so he's very much an insider to the brand. And I think that there needs to be some hard conversations at Prodigy about the public reputation of the company, its perception among the disc golf community, and what you plan to do in order to make changes and to address that. And Will is going to have to really be fair, I guess, in those critiques and observations. And if he just kind of like, throws up the walls and says, well, that none of it's true, and doesn't actually address those issues, I think that could be a risk. And so it's important that Will takes a pretty broad perspective, and as an insider, it's going to be especially important. But all in all, I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's looked upon favorably, and that's a good start. And people feeling like they're maybe more connected with the leadership in that way is a helpful thing for a company that frankly needs to address its reputational issues. Mm-hmm. The fortuitous timing. Yesterday, the latest edition of the fandom survey data came out, and it was about how fans feel about disc manufacturers. So I encourage you to go check out the article on discgolf.ultiworld.com. And by the way, we're going to have Josiah Zuidsma, who's been one of the key architects and data analysts on this fandom survey project. He'll be joining the show. We're interviewing him on Thursday. I don't exactly know when the interview will air because we got to do Gaff's bracket.
We do need,
and we also got to get that interview in. So we'll see. It might come out Thursday. It might come out sometime next week. But the average fandom score for Prodigy came in at a 4.3 out of 10, second lowest, only ahead of Lone Star. And Prodigy, additionally, the number one factor negatively impacting their fandom was the quality of the discs they produce. And so, these are issues that are not uncommon or unfamiliar. Now, the thing is, I think Prodigy has made a lot of strides in improving the quality of the discs, and people maybe are remembering a reputation from a couple of years ago rather than what is actually happening now. But, when you have players on hot mics on the DGN broadcasts that are sponsored by your company and they're talking shit about the plastic, that's not a good thing.
Yeah. For reference, Charlie, you said it was 4 point something?
4.3.
4.3. Where does Innova rank?
We'll throw up the chart here. 7.8. Well, 7.9 rounding up. And they were the highest this year.
Okay.
MVP at a 7.5, Discraft at a 7.5, Axiom, Latitude, Discmania all over 7. And then you get into brands that are a little bit more maybe less known. So they get a lot of 5s.
Yep.
And that, as a result, they kind of get pulled down towards a 5, even if that's not necessarily a sign of dislike of the brand. It's more of like a lack of knowledge of the brand.
Just looks like a bell curve, right? Like just centerpiece.
When you're looking through the distributions of voting, Prodigy got more zeros than any company except Lone Star by like a fairly significant margin. Most companies' zero is under 3%, maybe a couple around 5%, and then Prodigy at 12% and Lone Star at 19%. So, look, I think part of that is who are your sponsored players?
Yep.
How do you treat your sponsored players, right? Obviously, Prodigy's had a lot of negative headlines over the last few years. And, the thing is, Prodigy has a very interesting history because they basically brought modern sponsorships to disc golf. Like if you're a new player from COVID or later, you may not really realize that Prodigy's only been around about 10 years. And when they came into the scene, they basically totally shook up the Innova Discraft monopoly on sponsored players because they were giving players a much more lucrative deal, including maybe an equity stake in the company. Now, the thing is, there were lots of drama around that. Maybe promises were not kept. A lot of people bailed right back out of there. So Prodigy's had its issues, but I think it's an interesting company because it is young and they are starting from kind of the low point right now. So there is an opportunity, I think, for them to re-accelerate. How they're going to do that without, having big sponsored players, which seems more likely than not that you're going to see the Robinson brothers bounce. I don't know. That's a tough ask.
Here's the issue too, is like, I like look at players and player interviews and for other companies, and all the time they're talking about, well, they made me this disc, I love it, it's the best disc in the world. They've got this new plastic, I love this plastic, and whether that's just like a poor job by the requirements of Prodigy for their sponsored players, or the sponsored players just don't believe it. Like the messaging is completely and starkly different between the Prodigy and other companies. Even like the last player I remember doing it super well was Kevin Jones, who was talking, and had a bunch of ads for his reverb and distortion. But then the problem is Kevin Jones just like stopped playing well on tour, and after he got the bag, like just like plummeted in terms of how well he was playing. And so they really do need a player who's a public figure, good on the mic, and who's ready to talk about what makes Prodigy's plastics different and why you should prefer those plastics. Because right now I just don't see it as often. It's not even a matter of, like, maybe they are doing that in other realms, but I just don't see it in the same level that I see others. And that's a problem when you've got the 2-time world champion on your team.
I mean, there's opportunity. They could do this in an easier fashion. I mean, they could just put advertisements out that focus on this, right? They run DGN ads. They're like, the new Prodigy plastic, address it head on.
Yes.
No flashing problems.
Yes.
No chalking it. Like, address it. Like, people have a thought about what it is, and you can address it. And I think that they could really help themselves if they kind of don't avoid it and don't just sort of like blame everybody else, which has kind of been the attitude, it feels like, from leadership over the last few years. So
spot on.
Interesting times. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, Will Schusterick joins us, having just been named CEO of Prodigy, and we'll get to some of these questions next. The Upshot is presented by Pound Disc Golf, makers of the best bags in the sport. Remember, you can still save 50% on mystery beverage carriers if you're looking for a great way to transport wine bottles or beers from your house to a party or something like that. They've got options available now. You get mystery color, but you only pay 50%. They've also got $50 off stock Octothorpes and $50 off toolboxes available now. So go get yourself a brand new bag for yourself or for someone you love that plays disc golf. The Octothorpe is the OG disc golf bag. I mean, this is the bag that many, many others have been built after. Often imitated, never duplicated. PoundDiscGolf.com. Why spend more of your hard-earned money when you can get affordable, high-quality CBD straight from the farm? The Upshot is presented by Sunset Lake CBD, a Vermont hemp farm creating CBD products designed to help you relax and decompress at the end of the day. The best part is that Sunset Lake CBD will ship it directly from their farm to your door. That means fewer trips to the store and more time for relaxing and doing what you enjoy. So if you're trying to wind down at the end of the day, try a Relax Gummy or a Vibe Gummy that's got just a little bit of THC in it just to take the edge off. Check out Sunset Lake CBD. You can save 20% off all orders. Just use code UPSHOT at checkout at sunsetlakecbd.com. Farmer owned, Vermont grown. Joining us now on the Upshot is the brand new CEO of Prodigy, Will Schusterick, also 3-time U.S. champion. Will, it's great to see you this morning. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks. Appreciate it.
I would love to hear just a little bit about your overall kind of time at Prodigy. You were throwing their discs. You were one of the first sponsored athletes. Of course, Prodigy made the big splash back in the 2010s. Signing tons of players, kind of changing what it means to be a sponsored player in disc golf. And then you've been working at the company now for a few years and moving up the ranks, and now you're the boss. So what's that journey been like?
Yeah, I'm, like you said, from the beginning, I started with Prodigy from the inception of the company back in 2012, 2013. And slowly kind of picked up more responsibilities along the way, such as helping with the team, putting together stuff such as like the part 2 events, talking to dealers about carrying our discs. And the idea was all the players actually had an ownership in the company. And the idea was to grow the company to where it was a point that was an investment for them. You look at any company that is either bought out or returns, or when you have ownership, you want that entity to do the best. You want it to be the greatest you can possibly be by owning a part of it. And so I really took that on because I saw that as something long term that can give something return. And I love having ownership. I love having ownership in anything and just getting behind something and being loving something and making it grow. Like I've always enjoyed doing clinics, showing people discs. And then I've just kind of continued to gain more and more opportunities in the company when it comes to, going to China, helping host the first disc golf tournament there. I had a hand in creating the street team. I had a hand in, a lot of the players that we ended up signing and coming on to the team. I met them on the road. I thought that they needed some support to get up there on the road, and I got them a deal with Prodigy to be a sponsored player and to throw our discs. And I thought that was always fun. It was always fun to kind of leverage what you had to kind of help your friends in playing disc golf, which we all love. And so just kind of continued to do that. And then really in 2016, 2017, I kind of started to slow down and have a family and really think of my long-term future more than I want to play as many tournaments as I can. Right? Like you can only be a professional disc golfer for so long, a professional athlete just in general for so long. And I started to think of, what is it that I want to do for long-term in my life? And so I've always loved Prodigy. I always love everybody and everything that I've ever done at Prodigy. And so they approached me and said, hey, we're looking at moving from Woodstock, Georgia, to another location. We need a bigger building. Company's growing, and we want to offer you a position to come in and do sales in the office. And that's really what ended up happening. I was already doing, you could say part-time sales in a way, because I was either doing course sales, tournament sales, talking to dealers. I would host clinics with specific dealers. They would come out, they would set up anything that would help grow the company, grow the brand, get it out there, get people to try this, all that good stuff. And my wife and I moved to Dalton in 2017, the end of 2017. So we've been here now for, coming up on 8 years. And moved here. We didn't know anybody. And I was the first person in this warehouse. Me and my wife were the first person with one of my best friends, Idris Garcia. And we were here sitting in Uline chairs, watching them connect the internet. And so I've seen from the very, every employee you can think of that has came through here, and from the top to bottom. And so we continued to build our team, continued to build the people that are on site, and have a hand in just about everything. And so continuing from there, it was from sales to always had a little bit of a hand in marketing, and then planning for the production of what disc we are, to new products, to, that encompasses nearly the entire company at that point. So yeah, it's kind of a brief background.
As you take over as CEO, what do you consider your top priorities and goals that you're hoping to accomplish?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. That's a very big, that's a very broad answer. I mean, there's,
it is.
I think a lot of people forget that we are a company, we are a business. And so, we are on the smaller side. We have not been around for 35 plus years, like the two main giants, and even a company like Latitude has 10 years on us. Dynamic Disc has 10 years on us. And so we're still early in the disc golf manufacturing years, and we've done a lot of things, really everything on our own. We make our own discs. We don't have somebody else who is making our product and branding it for us. We're learning every day. Everybody in this warehouse has understood, like, hey, when we come in, like, you can't assume you know everything. We're constantly growing and evolving and doing the right thing to get better. Quality, consistency, communication, all that kind of stuff. So really from the ground up, like it's not necessarily, am I coming in saying, hey, let's change everything that we've been doing? No, it's really the best business practices from the company level out.
So, Prodigy's had some kind of high profile PR troubles, I guess is the best way to put it. I mean, you have the lawsuit last year against Gannon. I think basically what we said on here, and I think what a lot of people felt, is that like Prodigy was basically in the right, that like a contract is a contract and both parties have to abide by the contract. And in some ways, I imagine many others in the industry were very happy that you were willing as a company to, sue your own sponsored player, because it was showing like we are willing to enforce this. And I think it kind of changed how everybody looked at the contract market. But on the other hand, it is like definitely tough to have a bunch of stuff end up being in public, court filings where, you're kind of having this public spat with a player that ostensibly you want to be promoting. How do you, do you feel like that was the right move for Prodigy? And I know you weren't the CEO at the time, but like, how do you kind of like look at some of the struggles from like the PR side of things and try to move past them as you head into, the beginning of your tenure?
Yeah, of course, you can't go back and change what has already been done. Even to comment on it doesn't really make any difference of what we have done or how it's going to be perceived. An action by a company, especially in such a small niche sport like disc golf, like anything that happens in disc golf is spreads very fast, and seems very drastic, of course, coming in. It's really hard looking back and saying, would I have done the same thing? I don't know exactly, yes or no. Was it the right decision or wrong decision? It's very difficult to say. Do you let somebody go to another team? Do you do that? Do you try to work out something else? Don't know. Again, it doesn't matter what I would have done or the fact is that it's just in the past. And so, I don't really know what to do besides that. Like, it's always easy to rehash decisions that were made previously. And was it the best decision or the right decision? It's always up for interpretation, depending on who you ask and how you ask it, and their decision-making power. And if they've ever been in that decision-making before. Typically, a lot of people who comment and have things to say have never been in that position to having to make a tough decision. And so, would it have been just as bad if he went to another team? Don't know. Would it have been worse or better? It's hard to say. And that's why it doesn't really matter what the decision would have been if I was the CEO or not, because it is what it is at this point. And so we've moved on, and that's about it.
I want to change up that question then a little bit, because you're right, hindsight is always 2020, and even then it still can be difficult to know and play the counterfactuals about what would have happened if you'd done it differently. But in a sport where a lot of times the contract negotiations, and if there are disputes happen, it's oftentimes done a little bit quieter than obviously the Gannon issue, or even like the Chris Dickerson one, for example. So my question is twofold then. Number one, do you believe that in the wake of these contract disputes, Prodigy has a PR problem that needs addressed? And if so, what is your plan as CEO to try and tackle that PR problem?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in regards to any contract dispute, it's really interesting where disc golf is like as a whole right now. Because you look at other professional sports, they have, theirs is a little bit different because they're dealing with millions and millions of dollars, and there's a couple people that have a contract in that value for disc golf right now. It's not the same when it comes to disc golf, because a lot of people are not making that type of money when it comes to disc golf. For me, when it comes to the PR side, I've always felt like communication is the best route, whether it's a really hard decision or a really easy decision to make. And when it comes to being any manager, CEO, business professional, you have a lot of really hard decisions, and you have a lot of fun decisions typically there's a lot more harder decisions to make than easy decisions. And really, you just have to live with what happens. And that's just kind of the end of it right there. Is, would I have made the same decisions? I don't know. Can't tell you that I would have or would not. I can tell you that there's a lot of really hard decisions to make for the business itself, and you have to deal with whatever repercussions that is. I think the best way is to effectively communicate. These decisions are very difficult and very hard, but you do have to put the company first when it comes to making decisions, and it's really difficult. It's not fun, but that's just what has to be done sometimes.
You've been in the sales side for a while, so you've probably got a pretty good picture of this, and now even more so as the CEO. How is the slowdown that we've seen this year affecting Prodigy? And do you feel like there's kind of like a light at the end of the tunnel, or is it like, what are your projections like for 2025?
Yeah, it's interesting because I saw, your article too. Like, I felt like it was maybe a little bit off because I feel like we had a pretty decent last. We've done pretty good as a company. Just as a reminder, we're not as big as Innova and Discraft. I'll use those two, and Latitude. I'll use those as examples. We're a smaller company that's coming up, and we've built a lot of careers for professional disc golfers. Like, a lot of people have started with Prodigy from the very beginning, right? And when they get bigger and they get to be a top player, and you have somebody come in and offer them a lot of money, it's hard for a smaller company to put out a lot of money to sign somebody. And that's okay. That's okay that, again, you can only be a professional disc golfer for so long. You can make as much money as you can because you're only going to do it for so long. That's just a fact of life. And so, for us, we've got a lot of really good plans, a lot of really big announcements going to be coming in the near couple of weeks, which we're very excited about. And we've done a lot of good stuff in the last year or two. A lot of planning. You really have to move with how the market is functioning, not necessarily from a disc golf side. I think it's from the everything outdoor sports related side. And so you have to go up and down with how that's working, and you have to really strategize and plan for the future. Nobody knows what's going to happen in the market for the next year or 2 years, but you kind of have to plan for the worst, hope for the best when it's kind of coming out. I think that's kind of a good approach in my mind, and just continue what you're good at. I mean, we make discs, we make really nice discs, obviously, and continue to marketing those products, put together really good events, and doing great things.
If I could ask one follow up on that, you talk about the reference to sales and saying that you guys did do pretty well this last year. I just want to know in terms of reference, because it feels like a lot of the industry, we expected 2024 to kind of stabilize, and it didn't. So I think most companies would say that they had a year over year decrease in sales, profits, whatever metric you want to use. So I'm curious, did Prodigy have year over year decrease from 2023 to 2024? And are you projecting and you say you're planning for the worst, are you planning for 2025 to also have a decrease, or are you planning it to stabilize or even rebound?
No, I mean, just to be clear, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that you plan on the low side. You're not coming in with these super high, crazy investments in something that, hey, disc golf is going to be in the COVID boom. Let's make 1 million discs and have 1 million discs sitting on the shelf waiting for people to buy them. We're very lucky that we can, and we have a machine that we can not a machine, but a machine of our manufacturing side that we can ramp up or control a lot easier than a lot of companies that don't produce their own discs. And so there's a lot of control you can have when you're making your own product. And so for the last couple of years, obviously, yes, the market has taken a decrease and a slowdown. I don't think that there's a lot of people that have done more from 2023 to 2024, especially coming off of the COVID boom. But again, I think that the strides our company has made when it comes to the quality, consistency, product, marketing, all that stuff, we've gotten very good, and excited for everything coming up in the future.
I know Josh has to take off. He's got to head to his city council meeting this morning. So Josh, thanks for being here. But Will, you and I will continue.
Yeah. Thanks, Charlie. Thanks, Will. I appreciate it, guys. I'll see you later.
All right. So, I thought it was very interesting. A couple weeks ago, there was a release from Prodigy that kind of acknowledged some of the disc quality sort of, issues that Prodigy has had in the past with certain elements of QA, and basically said, like, listen, our new discs are awesome. And I've heard that too. Like a lot of people in our Discord have said, like, yeah, I picked up a new Prodigy disc and the plastic feels awesome. And it seems like some of this stuff is getting put behind you. How has that come to pass? Like, where were those issues coming from? And is it because you've moved more production to the United States? Or is it like a plastics, change? I think some of the like details behind that, I don't know what you're willing to share, but I think it's very interesting. And in some ways, maybe people have an outdated idea of like what Prodigy disc quality is.
Yeah, I think that's it's interesting. It's like, some of it is a wrong people, wrong place. When it comes to understanding how to make discs, again, we make our own discs. There's not somebody else that has 30, 40 years experience of like, hey, this is what you do not want to do. This is what you want to do. And so we're coming in and learning a lot. We've learned a lot with our team. Our team has really picked up on what to do to kind of supersede those issues. And when it comes to the quality of discs, I always thought it was interesting that people thought we moved all their manufacturing to China when that's like almost impossible to do so. We make 80, 90%, probably 90 or more percent of discs in Dalton, Georgia, versus our factory that is in China. We make a lot of stuff coming from there, but we make discs every single day in Dalton, Georgia. I make a lot of discs. And so, when it comes to the quality, there was some issues that we have tracked down and figured out exactly what the problem is from the source, be able to change that, be able to adjust it and move forward to nothing than bigger and better. And so it's really, from a business strategic side of what is the problem? Let's track it down. Let's talk about it. Let's decide what we want to do to fix it, make it better. And then promote that we're actually actively doing that as well. And like I was saying earlier, I think it's really important for the communication side. Hey, as Prodigy, we've heard for a long time that you guys do or do not like this part of either our product or our brand or whatever. Hey, we're actively working on that kind of stuff. I think it's very important to listen to constructive criticism and work towards making it better for the company and the brand.
I have a New York Rangers.
I saw that.
Prodigy collab here. How has that gone? The NHL deal.
Very good. Yeah, we have the NHL. We're the only company that can do licensed collegiate printed discs as well. So, we can do 1,300 colleges, 1,400 colleges. People are able to order those. And we have some more ones that are coming out with some full color prints that are going to be very popular as well when it comes to college, especially in the middle of college football or near the end of college football season, but it's kind of like the peak college football season. I think those are going to be very popular. So yeah, those have been very, that's a great partnership that we've had with the NHL.
Okay, cool. Love this Frisbee. Haven't thrown it though. It's straight on my wall. I'm really curious, like, what sells the most? Drivers, mids, putters? Like, if there's just like globally, like, and not specifics necessarily, but just like even anecdotally, what do you feel like is the thing that drives the most sales in disc golf?
I would say, putters obviously drive the most because you want to have, people need 5 to 10 putters to practice putting.
Right.
They're typically buying a new driver if they lose their driver. They're typically not having 10 to 20 backup drivers sitting on the shelf. They end up throwing a driver for a lot longer, whether that's because it's typically more in a premium plastic, typically you go from a beginner or intermediate player, you gain distance, more arm speed, you need to change up the disc you're throwing, different stabilities. That only really happens one time in your career. You don't typically go from, hey, I'm throwing beginner to intermediate level disc to advanced to intermediate beginner. Like, you're not going like this. You kind of get to a certain level of distance and throwing power, and you're like, I know what disc I like and what disc I throw and the stability of disc, so that having a ton of distance drivers might not make the most amount of sense. Having the same putter 50 times makes a little bit more sense.
There's always been a regionality to disc manufacturers and sales. I think, you look at California, you're going to see a lot of Innova. You go to the upper Midwest, you're going to see a lot of Discraft and maybe MVP these days. And you go to the Southeast, you're going to see a lot of Prodigy. How much of a factor is that in sort of how you think about the business, or especially as you kind of think about now that you're taking over, like how you want to move forward? Do you want to try to emphasize like having that kind of stronghold in the Southeast, or is it like you're and obviously Prodigy's done a lot in Europe too. Do you think about trying to become like a bigger, more international brand, or at least pan US? I mean, obviously anybody can buy any disc these days on the internet. It's not like it's not possible, but I do think that there's always been this sense that like certain brands kind of have more strength in certain parts of the country. Is that relevant for you as you think about kind of how to structure your business?
Yeah, I don't think that we really don't approach it like, hey, we really need to grow more in these specific areas. And if we were, it's kind of a different way than targeted ads, so to speak. Like if you're just saying, hey, we need to grow more in Minnesota, we need to do targeted ads in Minnesota type deal. Yeah, I mean, we're a global brand, right? Like it's not like focusing specifically on sales in the Southeast, which is why we're bigger in the Southeast. We do a lot more events in the Southeast. So, I mean, that can be a part of it. We have a lot more connection to courses and just visibility in general. And the same thing with any manufacturing or any disc company, like certain areas are very popular for other companies. Like you're saying, you want to support the local manufacturing companies that are in those specific regions. Like California for Innova, they obviously have really deep roots for putting in courses and being involved locally for a lot of events. Discraft in Michigan, they've been running events up there for years. And so obviously they're going to have a lot more of a stronghold in those general regions. And so for us, we don't just target one specific region and say, hey, let's grow there. We do talk about how we need to have more of a presence in certain states, in certain areas that we should focus on. But it's not like a strategic plan to come in and say, hey, we need to grow more sales in Massachusetts or Maine. And like you're saying, we really need to grow it all over. Like we come in with the intent of growing it all over the country.
What do you think the next phase of disc golf growth looks like? We had this COVID boom that kind of was an unpredictable boon for disc golf. And as you kind of mentioned earlier, the entire outdoor industry. Obviously, that's beginning to wane or is in the middle of waning. So what's next?
It's a good question. I don't think anybody really knows the true answer. I think a lot of people right now are just kind of moving with the market to seeing how it's going. I think disc golf is always going to continue to have an increase, whether it's a slight increase of new players or a big increase of new players. I think the sport itself is continuing to grow. The amount of courses that are going in the ground, the amount of people that are playing. Maybe on the professional disc golf side, it's going to be an interesting year. I really don't know what the next level is. It's going to be interesting. Is there going to be new parties that come in? Is there going to be bigger events with more money? But are bigger events more money going to increase the amount of people that are playing disc golf? That's right. That's the end goal. There is getting more people into playing. And rising tide raises all ships. And so the more people that are playing disc golf, the more that the manufacturers and the companies are going to see that return on. So it's interesting. I don't really know how to answer that, what the next step is for disc golf, because it's always been in this phase of like the slow increase. Each year is maybe a little bit different. Nothing's going to be like COVID where it just took this crazy jump up. I don't think that we're going to see something like that. You can't really plan for that either. It's going to take something to really show the sport on a massive scale to get more people into playing. When you look at pickleball, they're making a movie about pickleball. I turned on, I walked into a restaurant and I see pickleball on the TV. They're on the tennis channel. Like those are big things that are making people watch it, see it, understand it. And that's what disc golf is actually going to need to take that next level, is how many people can we show the sport off to and get more players playing.
I saw a picture of you. I can't remember if it was I don't think it was on the press release, but maybe just on Google, doing a ribbon cutting ceremony for a par 2 course. There's not that many of those kinds of courses around. I mean, I've played a couple of them. I know I played one in Ohio. We just got one in the sort of New York metro area. Well, frankly, the new Highland Park course is probably more or less a par 2 course. But there's a little Ace Place course up north of me that's kind of put in near a much more challenging, par 3 to 5 course. But then there's like a little kind of like throw your putter par 2 type course. Do you think that's an area that disc golf can use to grow? I mean, I think one of the things about pickleball that makes it grow fast is that it's really easy to start playing. It's like not so complicated. It kind of feels like big ping pong. And disc golf's learning curve is a little higher. Understanding how to throw the discs, playing longer courses. We have a lot of longer courses. Is that an area that you see as a potential growth path, like sort of making it easier for beginners to pick it up?
Yeah, I think so, for sure. I mean, smaller courses, being in the schools. I actually work with the Dalton Public Schools here. We put permanent disc golf baskets, 50 permanent disc golf baskets at every single Dalton Public School last year.
Nice.
And the one you were talking about is actually, there's an 8-hole disc golf course in downtown Dalton used entirely with, par 2. So it's really short, really 120 feet or less, with little green areas that are used for nothing else, other than an 80-foot putt. And then you walk to the next spot and walk to the next spot and walk to the next spot, and you walk throughout all of downtown. And so people have played that with business outings, going and like walking around, playing around. You can get a cup of coffee and go play 8 holes of disc golf. There's pictures, if you look online, of like 5,000 people at a concert, and our disc golf baskets and like set over to the left because it's a permanently installed basket. So yeah, that's the downtown par 2 course here.
That's cool. That's cool.
It's pretty fun. Yeah.
And I'm sure the businesses are happy to have the sort of like activity for people to be doing and walking past their shops. So for Prodigy, like, obviously, a CEO change is always there's a reason, right? Either somebody's leaving, or there was a need for a leadership change, or the business needs to do something new. Like, were you surprised that you've been tapped to become CEO? And what is like, why you, right? Anybody who becomes a CEO, there's a reason. Is it because you've been around for a long time and you know the company, or is it like they want you to take over because X?
And I would say that it would be, they want me to take over because of X. There was a previous CEO that has, I think I told you there's been a little bit of an opening. I really have kind of been taking on this role for the last, I would say, several years, and kind of growing into that. And the idea was always for, the owners of the company from the very beginning, the players, to take over the company and have a player-owned company, really. I mean, that was the goal from the very beginning. And so, for me moving here from 7 years ago, I've learned a lot about the business, learned a lot about disc golf, learned a lot about the manufacturing and business side. And it's not just like, because he's there, I guess we'll hand it off to him. I would say I'm very good at effectively communicating and having really good relationships. That's one of my key things is communicating, having good relationships, and planning and being able to make hard decisions, even though they might not be popular. I'm okay being the person that has to make those hard decisions. And so, there's obviously a team of people here. It's not just me in one big warehouse. You can't do everything from start to end and make the disc, stamp the disc, ship the disc, market the disc. Like, we have an amazing team of people. It's not just me. And so it's a team effort, and it's not just going to be me communicating and that kind of stuff. I think it is important for people to know who is behind Prodigy and the decisions that are being made. And maybe that's a reason why the PR stuff has not been as perceived as well as it could have been. Because like I have said before, there's hard decisions to make when it comes to any business, and they are necessary to be made. They're maybe not the most popular, but you don't want popularity to wean in on the best business decision.
You hinted at some big upcoming announcements. Can you tell us a little bit more? Obviously, I don't expect you to tell us exactly what they are, but what do they relate to? Player contracts?
No, and I'm not here to tell you something that you don't already know, but they're more partnership announcements and directions for the company that I think people will be maybe a little surprised with, but it's also very exciting at the same time.
Okay. Interesting. Well, hey, really appreciate you coming on. As you kind of think about like where Prodigy is right now compared to where it was when you kind of came on to the role, first started working for the company in 2017, 2018, something around there. I know maybe you feel like you've been working for Prodigy since 2013.
Sure. Yeah, either way.
How is Prodigy positioned right now? Does it feel like things are going well? Things need to improve? Where's your head at?
We always need to improve. I mean, every day we come in, we're always we're not in the mind frame of being complacent with whether, we're making a good quality or good this or good that. Like, you always have to be on to the next thing. And you always need to be 3 to 6 moves in advance to be able to make the right decisions. And for us, I think that we're on a good path. We have a lot of good things planned and a lot of people in the right place to make the right decisions. And I think that's what's important for our company, is to do the right thing for the company, the brand, the sport, all the above. And so planning is one of the most important things, making the right decisions on what to do, effectively communicating, relationships, all that from the ground up. So
awesome. Well, really appreciate your time, Will. Thanks. And congratulations on the promotion.
Thanks.
Will Schusterick with us here on the Upshot. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to the Upshot. Thanks again to Will for stopping by. I think it was interesting to me because I mentioned in one of my questions that Prodigy put out this Q4 kind of like news release where they directly acknowledged that there have been some issues with quality control in the past. And I found it a little odd that Will wasn't kind of willing to just say, yes, we've had these problems. Yes, this has been an issue. And we are looking forward, like, our new plastic is great. And we are going to move forward and try to put some of those issues behind us. Just generally kind of like a lack of acknowledgement of some of the problems. And, in some ways I get it. It's like, Will's like, hey man, it's not my fault that we sued Gannon. But on the other hand, it's like, you're the boss now. So yes, you kind of have to just be like, yeah, that was a tough spot for us to be in. And we were stuck between letting somebody walk away from a contract they agreed to and having to take legal action and have that become public. And we made a choice, and it was, ultimately, I think some people felt that we were in the right, and other people felt like we should have been more acquiescent to the pro. I don't know. I think it's a tough thing to handle. I do get the sense that Will wants to move forward. I do think that's the right attitude. But I think it would be helpful for Prodigy to do more of the acknowledging of some mistakes and issues and say, and here's how we're addressing it, and here's what you can expect from us moving forward.
Will doesn't own the choice to sue Gannon, but Will as CEO now owns the perception that Prodigy doesn't treat its sponsored players well. And whether or not you want to say that that's true, and Prodigy wants to argue about whether or not it's true, the perception is still there, and people care about their pros, and the perception of the plastic is still there, and people like it is critical that you recognize that the way people perceive you is more important than the truth of the matter. And that's the part that just like, I remember when I saw online, and it's funny because, we talk about the Gannon thing as being such a big moment, but when it was happening, like it was pretty 50-50 split about who people thought, like people who thought Prodigy was in the right. It was not just like the biggest PR crisis ever. Like they could work through that pretty easily. The biggest thing though, and this, I remember, I think I might have talked about this. Someone had mentioned about like the flashing issues and the issues with the discs in reference to Gannon's, like during the lawsuit, and Gannon like citing the reason to break the contract. And Kaylee Viska came on was on Facebook and said something to the effect of like, oh, it's funny that he's complaining about the quality of the discs when he just won a major with them. Mm-hmm. And it's like, that is not the answer, especially because he leaves your company and goes and wins 9 tournaments, including 2 majors. It's like, now you just look real dumb, because if that's like, was it the plastic holding him back? I don't know. Like that, you need to then go in and just, Will is right. Prodigy does need to move forward and move past these things, but you have to acknowledge them and bury those skeletons along the way. Otherwise, you just leave them in the trunk and keep dragging them along with you, and they're going to keep haunting you.
Yeah. It's interesting. Like, among people in the fandom survey who selected Isaac Robinson as their favorite player, 10% of those people also selected Prodigy as their favorite manufacturer.
That's tough.
So let's make a comparison, right? So 10% for Isaac, 5.5% for Chris Dickerson, 8.3% for Kevin Jones. Now name a pro or manufacturer. Barella? Okay, so Discraft.
Barella and Discraft.
Okay. Barella, 40.9%.
So
40% of people who picked Barella as their favorite player said Discraft was their favorite manufacturer.
Okay. Give me
How about
Calvin.
Simon at MVP? 38%.
Give me Calvin.
Calvin at Innova. 43.9%.
Ricky.
With a 55% Nate Sexton and a almost 60% Greg Barsby.
That's because anybody
the old heads prefer Innova.
I was about to say, anybody who still says Greg Barsby's their favorite player is over the age of 45.
Yeah. We will get into this more when we talk to Josiah. But there's some really interesting stuff as you look at like when people started playing, what their favorite manufacturer is. And I think that could tell us about the future and how market share might change. Do you want one more?
I want Ricky real quick.
Okay.
I'm curious if because Ricky's been pretty high profile with Innova as well.
10.6% for DD.
See, here's what's interesting. We've talked about the Ricky deal and what kind of value it's bringing to DD.
Yeah, I got a crazy fact for you.
Okay, yeah.
Innova for Ricky, 34%.
Innova
wow.
did better with Ricky. And like, that's...
But I mean, I also think that like Ricky isn't sort of like especially famous and popular pro.
Yes.
So as a result, he is going to have a wider range of, connectivity to other manufacturers. Like I bet if you include Discraft, there's like a big chunk of Discraft on there too. I mean, it's only 8%, but that's only notably a little bit lower than DD.
I was about to say the fact that Discraft is still almost the favorite company next to the company he currently is paying him $4 million. That's tough. But to your point, right? Top pros, and I think that there is something to be said about the power of Isaac Robinson as a branding figure. I know that he's won Worlds twice, but he is not an Anthony Barella in terms of branding popularity. Like, there is work that needs to be done, and I don't know how much of that is Isaac Robinson and how much of that is Prodigy, but it's a problem when your best pro does not doesn't even command the bringing players who like him the most over to your company. That's an issue.
Yeah. So, things to address for sure. But Prodigy, I think, is in a spot where they have this opportunity to reboot.
Yeah. Yep.
Different players, new CEO, the whole deal. So, going to be interesting to keep an eye on them. All right, how about this? So GK Pro comes out with a YouTube, it's like a thumbnail. It says like we're leaving. Goodbye.
Yeah.
Was that what it was? Goodbye.
Yeah. Turns out it was an announcement of an announcement.
Classic.
Those are so
classic.
Cool.
I mean, it's if someone's actually going goodbye, they don't do a big build up with a YouTube premiere.
No.
So what are they doing? Well, they're rebranding to Go Throw with kind of like a retro 70s font and vibe. And they announced the 2025 Go Throw Tour, which, quoting their website, featuring your favorite pros across some of the world's best courses. Stops include Hideaway Disc Golf Ranch, Persimmon Ridge, Eagles Crossing, Kayak Point, Pfaler Lake, and more to be announced. And also the Majestic. So that's what's on the list. They have tickets available now only for Eagles Crossing. But Eagles Crossing is promising a $20,000 first place prize and $50K purse, over $50K, I should say, along with a skins match and other things. Immediately upon the release of this, there was all kinds of speculation. Competitor to the Pro Tour, DGPT's got to look out. And then there's been all this kind of like hubbub about the tour card and a non-compete clause, which has been removed for 2025 and probably was not designed to prevent pros from playing in A tiers.
Sure.
So what do you make of all this, Josh? I mean, I think it's interesting to see a YouTube media company make their own mini tour, including a lot of really good, interesting courses that people will be excited to watch, but, probably will not have live coverage.
Yep.
Will be kind of like YouTube next day only, and with more, I would imagine, varying fields from what we can typically see at a Pro Tour event. But I mean, I'll let you react, and then I have some more thoughts.
So there's some weird things about this to me, because at the first part of it, like March 8th, so Hideaway Disc Golf Invitational is, if you go to the website, go through dg.com/go-throw-tour.
Yeah.
Side the hyphen. You can see the tour stops that they have currently listed. Okay. Yeah. Hideaway Disc Golf Invitational, March 8th and 9th. Look at that. It fits right between the Florida Open and Waco. Great.
I'm sure we're going to see a good crowd.
Yeah. They're and it's in Texas. So like they're picking A tiers and scheduling that kind of is meant to be like a puzzle piece that fits into the Disc Golf Pro Tour stop. You have, and maybe pros, maybe they reached out to pros and were like, hey, would you play more disc golf if there were more options for professional level disc golf that had certain standards and money payouts? And I bet there were some pros that were like, yeah, honestly, we would play more. We don't mind. Now here gets the weird stuff. So then you get a little further, and we get to like the Kayak Point show.
Well, let's just note the next stop is Persimmon Ridge, which is not on a Pro Tour weekend. It's in Arkansas on the 28th through the 30th of March, which is in between Open at Austin and Music City in Nashville.
Okay, great.
Then you have Eagles Crossing, the April 12th and 13th. That's in Missouri, and that is right before Kansas City Wide Open, which, hey, that's also in Missouri.
Look at that. Okay, now we're going to get a little bit weird. Okay. Kayak Point Showdown, May 23rd through the 25th. Well, look at that. That overlaps with the Kona Peach Day Open, which is the Disc Golf Pro Tour event this year. Okay. Mind you, The weekend after is the Northwest Disc Golf Championship in Portland, which is an Elite Plus. So I would expect most players are probably not going to Kona Beach Day. Okay, so I'm good right now. That's fine, makes sense. Then we get to the Majestic, which is June 19th. And when you look at that, that's the same weekend as the U.S. Women's Disc Golf Championship. Now, that's a little bit weird that you're going to run it over a major.
Well,
but it's
MPO
the
players.
FPO. So it's an off weekend for MPO players to play. Okay, fine. I hear you. That makes sense. So then we're going to jump to, and this is one, it just keeps getting worse, Charlie. Failure Lake Bomber Only Invitational is on September 10th. And that one fits okay. And that one doesn't overlap with anything.
That's between D-Glow and GMC.
Yep. And this is
that's in Pennsylvania. So, very plausible.
Yep. And then you have the Highland Brewing Player and Fans Invitational, which is October 3rd in Asheville, North Carolina. And that happens to fall right before the USDGC.
Yep.
The weekend before. So the issue that I have here is, like, we just got done talking about the impact that having multiple Pro Tour stops in Carolina has on community, on volunteers, on spectators, and like what that does for professional disc golf. And all of a sudden we just stuck another one right back in there. So I don't know. It's odd. The biggest thing that I'm curious about, and especially with this media company, is like, I feel like there were ways that, with especially having Jomez, like, I don't know, I can't decide if this is competition or not. I can't decide, and how they're trying to frame it.
What I think, so as we just got through, right, like, they're not directly competing with Pro
Correct.
Tour stops. U.S. Women's as the outlier there. But, a lot of MPO players are going to play off weekends. It's going to happen either way.
And it's not live coverage. So,
right.
Yeah. Okay.
It makes a lot of these A tiers want to have video coverage.
Yeah.
And I think GK has been covering some of these events, or many of these events, previously. Now, I'll be honest with you. I watch none of that. I do not watch any of the A tier stuff unless something really remarkable happens and I, want to check out a crazy round or something like that.
Yep.
So I think this is fine. I feel like people are like quick to be like, oh yeah, like this is the thing that we needed, a competitive tour. Like, what I think is interesting is that I like a lot of these courses, and like on average, is the course quality better on this tour than on the Pro Tour? Maybe. The problem is a lot of these places are either super remote, no cell service, some other problem, right? Why isn't Eagles Crossing on tour? There's a reason.
There's got to be a reason.
It's got to be a reason.
Yeah.
So they're trying to make their own thing. Maybe they're putting money into this tour. I think this is, to me, fundamentally what I think is that this is a smart branding opportunity for GK Pro.
Sure. Who
has been getting the squeeze from the Pro Tour. And I don't mean that necessarily like specifically them, just like all media companies have been subsumed by the Pro Tour's increasing live coverage as well as acquisition of Jomez.
Yep.
Like, what are you supposed to do? You're going to cover third, fourth card, whatever. Like, no one's watching that. And these YouTube outfits are recognizing that and realizing that they need to, figure out a way to do something different. The rebrand, I don't know. It's fine.
It's fine.
I don't really know. Like, GK Pro was never a great name. To me, it was always confusing because you also had Gatekeeper.
Yeah.
So you had the two GK things.
Yep. So I think it's smart to break from that, but
yeah, I'm hoping we can have somebody on. I reached out to Luke Humphreys, but he's in Mexico. They were doing something down there, so couldn't get him for today. But hopefully soon we can have somebody on to talk about this, because I do think it's pretty interesting that we're starting to see some kind of, like, I think I could call it innovation from the YouTube coverage crews, where it's like trying to just do Pro Tour coverage isn't really working.
Yeah.
And I think in a way the Pro Tour should be concerned about that, because it's like you're not creating an opportunity for these other media entities to be successful. And then you end up with something that looks more like competition than cooperation. So, finding that balance there for a DGPT that's looking to make money and now owns its own pre-pro arm.
Mm-hmm.
What are you going to do?
It's fair. It is. The other thing that I think is going to be interesting to watch is like, let's say this, because if this doesn't go well, let's say GoThrow doesn't get that many views, and they get all these tournaments, and the tournaments put in lots of money, but like all this extra cash like doesn't actually attract that many pros, and they're not great attended, and so it just kind of ends up being like A tiers primarily, like that they were covering before. Then the Pro Tour is like, okay, whatever, keep running this little tour if you want. But I'm curious to know, like, what happens if this is just wildly successful, like you've said, because we love the courses that they're on, and it goes incredibly well, and all the top pros are making time out of their schedule to go there. And then GoThrow starts overlapping scheduling a couple times, and they pick a couple events that, hey, this event is gonna, it's already going over Kona Peach Day, but not a big deal. But they pick a few events and they overlap a little bit. What does the Pro Tour do to respond for that? Do they put exclusivity clauses in their and non-competes in their agreements and their tour cards? Do they, I think this is a big question mark if this goes incredibly well as to what the long-term plan is, because there's only so many weekends that the Pro Tour doesn't own during the golf season.
Yeah, and if the Pro Tour decides that it doesn't like the skinnier schedule and they want to have more of these events on their tour, they're just going to scoop them back up.
Right.
But I don't know. Like, I'm also excited to see other events kind of get a little bit of shine, even if all it is kind of branding it a little bit more.
Sure.
Like, some of these courses are awesome. And if you have like a little point series and you pay out some bonuses, like I'm totally into that. I don't really think it's really seriously going to compete with the Pro Tour. But it also offers these courses an opportunity to say, hey, look at the event we ran. It like kicked the ass of the one that you ran up 100 miles away the next weekend.
Yeah.
And it gives, that opportunity for them to say, hey, we should be on the top tour. So we'll see what happens. How many pros will play these tournaments versus the Pro Tour events?
Yeah. I would expect top players probably don't.
Depends on the payouts.
That's true. But still, like, I don't know. If I'm Gannon, I'd be like, whatever. I make $200K without you anyway. Like in just payouts, right? Why would I risk hurting myself by playing extra weekends?
Yeah,
for
maybe you play Eagles Crossing because they're paying you an appearance fee and this and that and $20K to the winner. But yeah, like if it's a $3,500 payout for first place, I don't know if that's a good A-tier payout these days. But I mean, maybe not.
But even $5K, like if you're winning on the Pro Tour regularly, why would you care?
Yeah, interesting move for sure. All right, that's going to do it for today's show. We've got the GAF bracket coming up on Thursday. Super excited for that. We'll also be talking sometime with Josiah Zutzma. That'll come out either Thursday or sometime next week. We are taking the holiday week basically off. We'll be back with you January 2nd. So we won't have official shows, but because we are anticipating there being some flurries of contract news and other things to talk about, we will be doing potentially some subscriber Inside the Circles live in the Discord over this holiday break to catch up on anything that's going on. What'd you say?
Hot stove.
It's
hot stove season.
Things are so much quieter than usual because companies are enforcing their December 31st contract deadlines. We used to get lots of news like in November and early December. And now it's a little bit more like a quiet period. And then on Jan 1 through Jan 15, we're going to get tons of news. So if there is stuff to talk about, we will discuss it with subscribers in the Discord. So make sure you sign up today. We'll be back with you Thursday. For Josh Mansfield, I'm Charlie Eisenhood saying so long, and we'll talk to you on Thursday right here on The Upshot.